Hello, Jordan here. Welcome to a very special episode of Crash the Mood. Today is going to be a short one. It's actually about a viewpoint that I hold regarding Dragon Ball Z. So, to me, I think it's actually pretty brilliant, and I'll tell you why. Because for me, the story of Dragon Ball is actually a pretty depressing one, and I'm not even going to touch GT because it's not canon, and there's a whole thing with that anyway. Anyway, so let's start off. At the beginning of Dragon Ball, you're met with Goku, right? And he goes on his journey into manhood, fighting, growing, meeting all new friends along the way while collecting the Dragon Balls, doing this and that, right? And towards the end of Dragon Ball, after doing his big save the world thing, when he fights Piccolo, he ends up settling down, actually. Something completely different from what he's been doing this whole time. He marries Chi-Chi, and they go off. They have their own little adventures for a while, but, they ultimately settle down, and then enter Dragon Ball Z. Taking place 4 years later after Dragon Ball, you find Goku happily married to Chi-Chi, and they have a 4-year-old son, Gohan. Not that you all need to know, because I saw you probably already know the story, but that being said, he's still pretty happy. And then enter Raditz, who proceeds to turn his whole entire life upside down. So Goku, who is, hasn't probably fought in a long time, still hasn't missed a beat when he fights against Raditz. He teams up with his old enemy Piccolo, and together they defeat Raditz. But during this time, he finds out that he isn't actually human, that he's a Saiyan, part of an alien race. He denies this for quite some time, and after defeating Raditz, it's not without its consequences. Goku dies. Death is a little weird in that universe because it's not necessarily permanent, given the Dragon Balls. And so during this journey, he trains, discovers new tactics, and he eventually returns back to Earth to help to save the day. It is interesting because during this time, things change. Like, for one, you have the start of people really thinking that, Goku will do it, Goku will save the day. It starts this whole thing that I call main character syndrome, aka the Goku syndrome. Almost treating him like a messiah since his return from death. Appropriate, I guess. But it's more to it than that. So, anyway, like I said, at the beginning of Dragon Ball Z, he has a family. He's happily married, and everything works out. But, right after that, he's thrust into the same battle and training for that, and fighting is once again the dominant force in his life. And right after the Vegeta thing, you have Frieza, and still has to train that, go to fight Frieza and all that. And again, fighting is the dominant force in his life, and it's consuming him, his family, his friends, all that. So after Frieza, though, it takes an interesting turn. He decides not to go back to Earth right away, having spent so long from his family. You think he'd want to go, but instead he travels the universe for a year, straight up abandoning his family, which isn't cool. Gohan's still a young kid at this point, and it's interesting. But then when he comes back, he still is training for to fight Cell and Androids, the new threat. But once again, fighting is pretty dominant in his life, but he makes a point to spend time with his family. And then when you get to Cell and all the stuff that happened with that, he decides to stay dead after sacrificing himself again to save the world, saying that, he seems to be a tracker for trouble. But I think it's more about the training, but that's a whole other thing. So he spends 7 years away training and fighting in the other world. Then he decides, even though I thought it was a good idea not to be anywhere near Earth, I'm going to go just for this one day. And when you know it, his return does put Earth in danger. some really messed up wigs, actually. And eventually Earth gets destroyed, but of course it's wished back, and everyone's wished back to life, and it's all happy. But after they face Majin Buu, Goku, he's in and out for 10 years, is something that they make note of in the final episodes of Dragon Ball Z, taking place 10 years after the Buu Saga. Many of the characters, especially notably Krillin, point out that Goku does in fact lead his family a lot to go train, and that this was no different. And sounds like everyone was upset that Goku hasn't been present in their life too much. But this being said, they just kind of accept it as who he is, and for me, it's kind of a depressing story, because you have this kid who, he's an alien from another planet. He ends up getting stranded on Earth. He grows and he adapts. He eventually settles down, gets married, has a family, and then he finds out he's an alien. He eventually assesses heritage, and in fact, he becomes more Saiyan like as the series progresses, because they're both for fighting, they live for fighting, and that's exactly how he starts, and that's how it pretty much ends. But it's interesting to note that even though Goku does become more at one with his Saiyan heritage, someone like Vegeta, who has grown up with nothing but war and domination under Frieza, becomes a more well-adjusted character than Goku at the end. He too is built for fighting, lives for fighting, like all Saiyans, but he adjusts to human life by the end of it. It's not without his struggles, because he constantly goes back and forth with that. I mean, there wouldn't be a Majin Vegeta if he handled this to the best of his ability, but again, he eventually does. Goku never does. He never gets over the fighting. He never stops. And when there isn't an actual threat, what does he do? He wants to train someone for the future, and he can act like it's because, he wants to be noble, but it's not. And Piccolo picks up on this at the end of Dragon Ball Z. So, it's just, I don't know, kind of sad to me. Brilliant, because it's just like, Goku is supposed to be this good stand-up guy, becomes someone who just lives for fighting by the end of it, abandoning his family and friends to train and train and train, all under the guise of saving the world, even when there isn't a threat. It's all he does, it's all he knows. It's all he cares to know by the end of it. And I think that makes kind of for a depressing story. Even Goku himself seems quite happy with it. And I find it very fascinating that it was written that way, and I mean, I enjoy it. But that's how I view Dragon Ball Z these days. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.